You are listening to Leading the Factory Forward with your host, Lynn Friest. We share interviews with manufacturing experts and strategies for embracing the digital future, recruiting a new workforce, finding new business. Lynn is an advanced manufacturing strategist and leadership consultant who is on a mission to show manufacturing leaders how to improve their current operations while preparing for a digital future. And here's your host, Lynn Friest.
Welcome, manufacturing leaders. You are listening to the podcast, Leading the Factory Forward. My name is Lynn Friest, and I'm honored to serve as your host. Whether this is your first time tuning in or you're a returning listener, welcome and thank you. Our goal in this podcast is to help manufacturing leaders to ship great products, earn a great living, and learn how to make themselves and their organizations even better. With that in mind, we'll serve as a guide to help you improve your skills and knowledge as a leader, improve your employees' skills and knowledge, improve today's operations and processes, and prepare for a digital future. We know that as manufacturing leaders, you face an overwhelming set of demands on your time and attention. So we are here to help serve you and do that work of collecting and distilling the knowledge that can help you, and to provide it to you in a way that allows you to craft a starting solution and go right to work on it. So let's get started. Today's episode is going to be about how to improve your processes. We'll be reviewing the 7 wastes in manufacturing that were developed in the Toyota production system. These are the things that, as you look at them, can help you eliminate frustrations you experience in the work, and just as importantly, it helps your employees to have a better workflow and less frustration in their work. By eliminating these wastes, it'll also help and give you higher quality products and provide better delivery to your customers. So the question we always start with is, so how do we improve? In traditional ways of thinking about manufacturing, we often just focused on speed, the speed of the work, how fast we did something. But in today's world, waste elimination and process improvement provide much greater returns and a better method to reduce cycle time within a process and deliver higher quality results to our customers. So we want to step back and identify value-added work versus non-value-added work. For a quick definition, value-added work is generally understood to be work that transforms the product in some fashion that a customer is willing to pay for. Non-value-added then would be any activity that does not give value to the customers. Now, some non-value-added activity may be necessary, but much of it is not. This is all visible on the shop floor, and you can see it in the work that you do each and every day. So, using these ideas, let's step back and take a look. The 7 categories of non-value-added work are transport, inventory, motion, waiting, overproduction, overprocessing, and defects. And we'll go into each of these and provide you with some examples. Our first example is in transport. It's any material movement that is not directly adding value, and it does not transform the product by its very nature, but it just moves it around the factory. Often, improper layouts create transportation waste. Some examples that you can observe on the factory floor is you have a lot of fork trucks, probably extra ones, just in case. There are multiple storage locations for materials. Often people have to go between them to find the same part or different parts. You find a lot of extra racks out there for putting stuff on. An outcome will be inventory inaccuracies because you lose track of these things that you're moving around all the time. And finally, people who are charged with moving material will find themselves with imbalanced schedules. And the final thing you'll probably see is you've had to construct barriers to prevent your fork trucks from running into racks or work areas. As one example, I had a factory manager remind me once that our customers had no interest in paying us to truck parts for miles around our factory. They just wanted them put together the right way in the first time. The next waste is inventory. And that's any storage of material in excess of what is needed to meet the customer needs. Extra stock wastes space and it wastes effort. Some examples you'll see out there are large receiving areas, material that never moves, it's got dust on it, long lead times for engineering changes and the ability to keep track of them, massive rework changes after extra inventory has been brought in and then there is one of those engineering changes. One final example is if you see yourself or your employees walking around something every day and very often, whatever that is probably doesn't need to be there. The next waste is motion. Any movement of a person or machine that does not add value. And think of how you and your employees are using your feet, your hands, your head, your eyes. Our goal would be to have everything needed for an assembly to be within arm's reach. And it really gets down to, have you got a well-organized workplace? So a couple of examples that illustrate that. In everybody's kitchen, there are two very different drawers. One is a silverware drawer, where by and large everything is lined up and in a particular order. And the other is a junk drawer, where it's just a jumble of material in there. I had one of my friends in manufacturing once say, think about how you would like your surgeon. Do you want your surgeon working out of the junk drawer or the silverware drawer? Another example we saw in my history in the workplace is there was a tool drawer. It was full of open-ended wrenches. The question was asked, okay, this job requires a 16-millimeter wrench. Do we have one in that jumble of wrenches? Well, actually, as it turned out, there were 4 or 5 of them in there, because since people couldn't find them, they kept ordering more wrenches. So again, this idea of let's have just enough tools, but have them where they're needed. Another positive thing with having tools and parts laid out the way they're needed, it can give you a visual cue as to what's the method of work required. You know you need to move to that next part and that next tool, and it helps give visual process documentation. Some other examples that you'll see is if there's a lot of walking or bending or reaching during your work cycle. Generally speaking, you want to be stationary. As I said, everything should be within arm's reach. Also, if you have to go looking for tools or parts, again, they're scattered about. You're spending time going to find something and not spending time creating value for the customer. And finally, sometimes our workplace designs are such that there's literally barriers between the operator and the material they need to use to do their job. The next thing is overproduction, and this results from producing more than the customer has ordered. Often shows up as extra subassemblies or parts that are partially put together. Sometimes these extra subassemblies create several different problems. One is quality. As they lay about, they can get damaged. There's a safety issue. Because these extra things are out there, it's a tripping hazard for your employees. And finally, it can cause inventory problems. If you've halfway assembled something into one particular product, and in fact, tomorrow you're going to need a different product that uses those same parts, you've wasted time and you often have to go back and disassemble something. The actual examples of this activity, you're building ahead of schedule. You have stockpiles of subcomponents. You have extra part racks to hold all the extra material you think you might use. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, it can cause an unsafe working environment. Then we come to the waste of waiting. Waiting is any idle time created when two people or machines, they're not synchronized. And waiting means you're waiting on the machinery or you're waiting on a person. And so you're not able to do value-added work because of something else going on. So some of the things that happen here is there's an imbalance of work that you can do versus what the machine could do. So each of you could be waiting on the machine and the employee waiting on each other. Sometimes there's a slow response time to breakdowns. Again, that causes waiting time while you wait for somebody to come fix things. And then there can be unplanned downtime simply because the parts, the things aren't in the same place or a particular cycle process is way too long. And finally, there's the ultimate wait where in case of a machine breakdown, you may have one maintenance person that has to wait on another maintenance person just because they each have different elements of that machine repair to do. Then we come to the waste of overprocessing. Overprocessing is putting effort into the product that is transparent to the customer, and sometimes it's just not even needed. It's often things that we've always done, even though we may have adopted some new processes, don't require it. It can also involve extra documentation. It would be helpful to normally just have one set of documents that tell an employee how to do the work, but often we've got multiple sets out there. So again, it's the idea of having maybe too much information or over-designing some of the things that aren't really useful to the customer or that they're even willing to pay for. But examples can be, we may have excess packaging going on. There may be confusion over specifications, how much of a piece of work has to be done. There could be extra copies or excess information, as I mentioned earlier. And then the last one is endless refinement. We can keep redoing and redoing and redoing things. Again, is the customer really getting value out of some of that activity? Finally, we come to what many people feel is the biggest waste, and that's defects. Defects occur anytime we need to do the same thing more than once to meet a customer's expectations. Doing it right the first time always avoids scrap and rework. Defects are actually rarely caused by people, at least intentionally. Usually, defects are caused by inadequate training. There could be an incapable process. There could be incapable suppliers not giving you the material you need. And there also can be the transportation damage, which goes back to our earlier talk about too much transportation. G. Edwards Deming often said that 85% of all defects are caused by poorly designed or inexistent processes. Only a small percentage of any defects were actually attributed to people on their own. So again, it goes back to all these other wastes, the whole need for having a good, solid process, both designed and documented, so that your people can easily execute it each and every time and robustly produce the parts you need without having to worry about, how do I do it this time? Usually having a good sequence of events, a good layout of your parts so it can even be visual for people. Those are the things that will help you create good, solid processes that become less and less prone to defects. In the end, defects are often a matter of how do we better document our processes? How do we better train our people? How do we eliminate the variation in the processes? So that brings to a close our quick summary here today of the 7 wastes. In summary, those categories of waste are transport, inventory, motion, waiting, overproduction, overprocessing, and defects. These 7 wastes are visible on the shop floor, and our goal would be to try to minimize them wherever possible. And again, examining these wastes are not done for judgment. It's not because somebody is wrong or necessarily done something wrong, but we are here to try to observe and make things better. And really the goal is to help you and your employees have a seamless flow of work without the frustrations that may exist today. Now, the 7 wastes can also be applied to work performed in an office. And in a future episode, we'll explore how to review waste in office processes. And also, there's an idea out there that there's an 8th waste, and that's the waste of underutilized employee talent. Again, we'll address that in a future episode. So here's my call to action for you today. Take the first step and choose one of the wastes to explore with your team. Take, for example, motion. Go to the floor with your team to a single work area and review with them where there are opportunities to minimize the motion required by employees to complete their work. Please leave a note in the website describing that waste and what your experience was. Thank you. Well, leaders, that's it for this episode. Thank you for sharing your time and attention with us today. We hope this has provided you with knowledge that you can turn into action so that you can keep shipping great products, earning a great living, learning how to make yourself and your organizations even better. Show notes and links to resources mentioned in the podcast will be found at my website, linfrias.com. You can also follow me on LinkedIn and Facebook. Those links are also on my website. If you would like to leave a comment on iTunes or on my website, please leave your name and I'll give you a shout out. My best wishes to you, and remember, manufacturing leaders, keep shipping, keep earning, keep learning.